What if I told you that there was a way that you could sound a lot more educated without more research or better argument techniques? We're going to talk about that today. And this is through sentence combining. Combining sentences can make us sound a lot more educated. For example, if we think about first grade or second grade writing, we often get these short, choppy sentences. I think about times when I was helping my niece read. We would pick out books and they would say something like, "Here is a cat. The cat is hungry. Here is some food. The cat wants the food." And the reason that they're doing this is because my niece, who was 6 at the time, could only maintain so much information at once. We as college students can retain a lot of information. And so we get these longer sentences that make us sound more educated. Let's look at an example here. In here, we have two paragraphs. The first one, short, choppy sentences. I have a particular difficulty in teaching. That difficulty is finding a correct balance. I need to challenge students. They sometimes feel overwhelmed, though. Critical thinking is my overall goal. Some students have never had their ideas challenged. You can hear a pattern starting, and that's one of the problems with writing is we don't want a pattern because that pattern becomes more noticeable in the reader's mind than our words. So let's look at this second paragraph in which I've combined sentences. One of the difficulties I have in teaching is finding the right balance between challenging students and overwhelming them. Critical thinking is always my overall goal. However, some students have never had their ideas challenged, and when I tell them the only valid opinions are the ones they can support with evidence, they feel like they are being attacked. This is something that I believe that college students can understand through reading. Again, my 6-year-old niece would have difficulty with these long sentences that have a lot of information. So we want to sound educated through sentence combining. We're going to look at 5 methods for sentence combining, and these are effective. These are something that you should be aware of as you're writing your essays or revising them. How can I combine my sentences to sound more educated? The first option we're going to look at is coordination of two independent clauses with a coordinating conjunction. An independent clause is like a full sentence. We have a subject and a verb. So we're connecting two full sentences with these coordinating conjunctions. So what is a coordinating conjunction? That's going to be these specific words for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so, or the fanboys. So let's look at a couple of sentences and see how we can combine them through coordination. Arnold found a water leak. He tried to fix it with his wrench. We have two sentences here. We're going to use one of those coordinating conjunctions to combine these. Arnold found a water leak and he tried to fix it with his wrench. And you'll notice that before the coordinating conjunction, I put a comma. Okay, so this is taking two independent thoughts and we're combining them into one. The next example, Amy didn't want to go to the party. She pretended to be ill. Again, we add a coordinating conjunction. Amy didn't want to go to the party, so she pretended to be ill. So this is a nice way of combining our sentences. We don't want to overdo it though. We don't want to keep going and say and. So we want to limit how many we use, but this shouldn't be confused with a run-on sentence. A run-on sentence doesn't have one of these coordinating conjunctions in between the two independent clauses. So you can use this to create longer sentences without creating that run-on effect. Option 2 is coordination of two independent clauses, but this time with a semicolon instead of that coordinating conjunction. So a semicolon shows relationship between sentences, but not as directly as that coordinating conjunction. So the coordinating conjunction shows this relationship, whereas a semicolon gives a certain amount of space. And we could think of a period as having even more space in between ideas. So let's look at a semicolon here. Arnold found a water leak. He tried to fix it with his wrench. This time, we just connect it with that semicolon. So we see we're just adding a semicolon in between. In the second one, Amy didn't want to go to the party, semicolon, she pretended to be ill. And that's just showing that there's a relationship between these sentences. Now, this isn't the most common used method. There's actually a better one, which is the next one, which also uses a semicolon. Option 3 is coordination of two independent clauses with that semicolon and a transitional phrase. So a semicolon that uses that transitional phrase, it helps show that relationship more closely, like a coordinating conjunction does. So let's look at the difference here. In the first example, Arnold found a water leak, semicolon, and then consequently, he tried to fix it with his wrench. So we're seeing cause and effect here. So these transition words show that relationship, but we're using the semicolon to separate these two sentences. If we remove the semicolon, we actually get a run-on sentence. And we can see that because we have two independent clauses that are being linked here. Okay, so we want to make sure we're using that semicolon and the transitional phrase. The next one, Amy didn't want to go to the party, semicolon, therefore, she pretended to be ill. Just a side note on the commas with these transitional phrases, or in this case, these transitional words, if your word is more than one syllable, you're going to use the comma. If it's only one syllable, you won't use a comma. So if we use a word like then or while, we're not going to put a comma after it. Option 4, subordination. So we think of coordination, we're coordinating two things. So we're tying together one side and another side, and they're both independent clauses or both sentences. Subordination now is going to make one sentence a dependent clause. Okay, so it can't stand on its own. It's not a full sentence. And then we're going to insert that independent clause. So if we turn a sentence into a dependent clause, we can then attach it to the beginning of the sentence. Let's look at an example here. And Arnold found a water leak. He tried to fix it with his wrench. Now we make one of those sentences dependent because Arnold found a water leak. And you can hear that this is dependent because if we just used it on its own, because Arnold found a water leak, we hear that it's waiting for something. So I've made that dependent, and now I give my independent clause. He tried to fix it with his wrench. So we can see that by using subordination, we can combine these sentences to again show a relationship between them. In the second one, since Amy didn't want to go to the party, comma, she pretended to be ill. So when we have that dependent clause, we're going to separate it with a comma from the independent clause. But this is also a nice way to combine these sentences because it shows that relationship between them. Finally, option 5 is subordination. So we have that dependent clause. This time we're putting it after an independent clause. So we're putting the full sentence first and then the dependent clause after. We don't use a comma when we do this. We only use a comma when we're putting the dependent clause first. So let's look at these examples again. Arnold found a water leak before he tried to fix it with his wrench. So we're seeing, again, this connection. We have a dependent clause and an independent clause, but we're not going to put that comma in between leak and before. We're going to leave it alone. We're going to start with that independent clause and move on to that dependent clause. Let's look at the second example here. Amy pretended to be ill because she didn't want to go to the party. We're seeing an independent clause of the first. Amy pretended to be ill. So that's a complete sentence. And then we have this dependent clause at the end. because she didn't want to go to the party. And again, we can hear that that's dependent. If I just said because she didn't want to go to the party, we notice that that's not a full sentence. So in this case, I'm putting the dependent clause after. And again, no comma in between the independent and dependent clause. So try these out in your last essay, your persuasive letter. It will help you sound more educated. It will give you more credibility in your writing.